think about content as something which a lot of people are failing quietly at. They get it made. They do the basics of it. They get it made. It gets posted on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and it just kind of sinks. It just goes out into an ether where we don't really quite know what is happening or how it's happening. And whilst there seems to be a lot of people who like to blame the lack of performance on an algorithm or some conspiracy theory they've got about the way that certain genders or certain expressed genders are treated on these platforms, the real problem is that there's work that tends to be made on autopilot. And this is going to make a lot more sense shortly. What's missing is that there's nobody actually checking the thinking behind that process of making that content. And we see it in the example, for instance, there was a post that went out last week from Pepsi International. And this post was all about, that cherry flavored Pepsi is the wild teenager who never asks permission and just goes and does it. And what it was read at by a lot of people is something to do with, not asking permission, not asking consent when it comes to, SA. I'll just say SA. I won't say the full word, but that's not the spirit of what they put out there. But at some point, somebody let that go through without actually checking the thinking behind it and the different ways that they may be read. Now, there's a cynical side of me that often thinks, well, that's very deliberate because they wanted to get rage bait in there so people that would all come and rage at them and they get great results on there. What I really think happened is that just nobody thought. There was someone who thought that was funny because it's like they were thinking of the rebellious teenager who does whatever they want. Meanwhile, they didn't think of how else it could be read or understood. Now, and I know that none of us are responsible for, how a message is received, but at the same time, we're businesses. So it is really important to us to know how we are received when it comes to the content we're making online. We've already got this watcher inside our heads, and some people call it the observer, but it's actually a process called metacognition, and it's thinking about your own thinking. There's a part of you that sort of does things on the everyday. You're just doing the work. You're going into Canva. You're making the repetitive stuff. You're putting in the QR code. You're doing the writing or you're using the AI. And then there's another part that's watching you giving that stuff and giving you instructions. Think about it as there's a driver and then there's an engine. We often have our engine running. We're doing that thing that we do with our content creation. But then there's a driver who is the difference between just doing the work and pumping out the content and doing stuff that actually lands in the way we want it to land, unlike Pepsi. That's definitely the poster child for not using metacognition. And while it's a fancy word, metacognition, I don't want you to think of it as metacognition. I want you to think of it as the thinking behind the doing. And this is where we go into a lot of what we do in business. We like to create things that we can do once and never have to touch again. And unfortunately, in a world of your social media channels, newsletters, website content, even YouTube and that kind of thing, that automatic one and done doesn't really cut it, and it never really did. I think once upon a time we had this idea we could make a radio ad or a television ad and just whack it out there and never have to change it. But the reality is people do change. At their very core, they don't change, but their tastes, their likes, the trends do move and do change. And if we're stuck in this one place and we're unable to move on to whatever that next thing is, then that's how we get stuck in our content. And we see this all the time with people, and I see it a lot on LinkedIn, and people saying, oh, I used to get 100,000 views of my content. Now I only get 20,000. It's disgusting. I'm being black banned and I'm being shadow banned. And they've got all these excuses for what's going on. But the reality is, but sometimes the era of the content you're producing has ended, particularly if you're producing really basic how to use Facebook content. That was relevant 10 years ago when Facebook was still relatively fresh. Now there's an assumption that people understand what Facebook is and largely use it. So the actual learning curve has gone up. So if you need to lift your content from that basic stuff, you need to go up to the next level now. It's kind of like also when you've got graduates coming out of IT degrees in university wanting to become software developers and discovering very rapidly that there is absolutely no market for low-level, unexperienced, and very basic software development jobs anymore because AI does all that now. So they have to go, well, I could either freak out and go, everything's unfair, everything's wrong, smash the looms and become a Luddite, or they go, okay, so I need to up my skills. Let me go and up my skills to something that is employable. And that's how it works. So the same thing is with our content. Sometimes that era, the content that we're doing is now over. We have to move on to the next thing and whatever that next thing happens to be. So the two halves of the skill of metacognition when it comes to all this content creation is you've got knowledge, right? You have knowledge of how your own head works. You have knowledge of what the task demands. You know how to identify a content, a topic you want to talk about in a post on Facebook. You see your Canva template. You know how to slip in a piece of some kind of photo in there. You know how to change the text. Oh, that's just the skill side of it. But then there's the regulation that looks at that and goes, "Am I doing this right? Could I be doing this better? Could I perhaps change that template?" And no, sometimes you just go, oh, I'm so sick of the way my stuff looks. I want to try something else. That's the observer. That's the thinker talking to you and going, okay, maybe I really do need to make a change in this. So it's the thinker that says, what do you do about this process of what you're working while you're working at it? Because raw talent kind of has a level it can come up to. And the watcher is what raises it up. So, okay, my repetitive task that I do every Wednesday at 10 a.m. is I do this thing with my Canva graphics, with my posting of Facebook ads, with my updating of my posts on LinkedIn. And that can get me so far. But then just that momentum and just that consistency isn't enough. I need to look at the next thing and I go, okay, metacognition says, let me go and look at my analytics or let me look at my insights. Okay. Metacognition then says, okay, that's not performing as well as it could have. Now, the non-metacognition, the automatic thinking goes, oh, the algorithm hates me. But metacognition says, what can I do better? It's not gaslighting yourself into being the problem because there is obviously an algorithm that does work for and against us sometimes. But it's what it says, okay, maybe there's something I need to look at here rather than just going and doing the same thing next week and the week after and the week after. And while none of us got into doing our businesses just to do marketing, that's certainly true. And I was the same. I got in there to make money, to be honest. But now I'm spending a lot of time marketing. It actually becomes fun when it becomes something that you assess and something that you kind of watch yourself doing. The fun bit is not the repetitive task. The fun bit is, what can I do different? What can I do that's slightly better this week? How can I become 1% better? And there's a cycle that goes underneath this, which is all about monitoring how that stuff's going. That's why you go into your analytics and go into your insights, monitor what's working, evaluate what you think it is about that that's working or not working, and then you do something new to help it grow. And then you plan what the next step is. They plan, monitor, evaluate, grow. And the plan is pretty much what you start with. You start with some kind of plan, a tactic, or in my case, quite an extensive strategy for my content, and then monitor how it goes. And some weeks it'll go freaking amazing. Other weeks, it just seems to just lie there. I was in a content funk, and then I found two posts in the last 2 weeks that really quite lifted my profile. Now, the problem is, though, that when things lift your profile, it isn't always a good thing. So this metacognition then says, oh, I had that post go viral. I've got 100,000 people have seen it, and all these thousands of people have commented on it. Metacognition then is the one that says, but is that helping me make money? And that's the difference when you do the evaluation of whether you're actually evaluating it against your business goals or whether you're evaluating against vanity metrics such as likes and shares and comments and followers and all those things that don't necessarily make money. And metacognition is what I used in the last 3 months to significantly change the kind of content I did, from stuff that I knew was guaranteed to always give me a great rousing applause and people going, yay, great stuff, love this, to stuff which was a lot more boring, but targeted at a very specific kind of person, a small business or a sole trader who doesn't have the digital skills that they need to be able to get to that next level in their business. And while there's a lot less of those than the ones I used to get, and I'm getting far less momentum with my content, what I'm getting is the right people are sending me messages. That's what I'm looking for, because the right people sending me messages is a lot closer to getting a dollar sign than what pumping out viral sounding stuff. And the problem is that most of our coaches and advisors out there in social media land are still obsessed with vanity metrics. They'll say things like, oh, those things don't matter when it comes to reporting that you haven't got any better. But they don't focus on what the thing is that does matter, which is actually conversions, customers, conversations leading to those things rather than just people hitting like or happening to see what you're producing. So the first phase in the planning is where we stock take what we're good at, what we know how to do, and what we know how to communicate. So you can say, for instance, if you are someone who works in, say, complementary medicine, you're a naturopath, and you're saying, okay, what I'm good at is helping people to feel good about themselves and matching a diet or supplement plan that actually helps them to continue to feel good about themselves. I'm really, really good at that as a naturopath. Then you align that to an audience. So, yeah, well, who is that audience? Who are the people who are likely to be interested in this? And you probably notice that most people who have an interest in naturopathy are probably not people who also have an interest in that allopathy or allopath or whatever it is, the pharmaceutical and the medical side of medicine. So they tend to be people who think a little bit differently. They're very nature oriented. They tend to think in terms of limiting the amount of chemicals, forever chemicals. They're not fans. You look for those people. That's your audience. The people who think a little differently. They don't follow everything. It might be a little bit skeptical. They could be a little bit hostile towards the establishment even. That's how you go, okay, here's what I'm good at, here's what I do, and here's the audience I think could be open to that. And then you pick the format first. What is the format that serves what you're trying to say to them? Now, that could be video. It could be you doing a talking head yapping video. I love a yapping video sometimes, but sometimes I also enjoy a long read. So what it could be is perhaps an article. It could be a newsletter. I consume so many newsletters. I also produce a couple of them every week. So it's one of those things that, what is the thing that you do? Now, the format first should be matched to the audience that you're trying to reach. What are they likely to come across? Are they more someone who reads threads in Reddit? Are they someone who watches Instagram Reels? Are they somebody who consumes mostly on LinkedIn? Or is it through their inboxes where they feel there's a sense of privacy and they're not sort of expressing what their cynicism and their beliefs are in a very open format like Facebook and Facebook groups? So that's phase one. This is where you plan for this sort of stuff. But be aware that all plans tend to be subject to what happens next, which is, how it's actually going to go. So as part of that plan, we write a bit of a brief before we do the content. And this is where we go, okay, well, where is our audience starting from? And this part is often skipped, but it is probably the reason why most content fails, because we just automatically go, oh, I know this audience. I know what they want. And then we start to make assumptions that don't land. So we have to look at what our audience already knows. So in their case, let's use the naturopath as an example. The audience may know that they have a stomach issue. They've got constant gastric reflux that's really making their life uncomfortable. And that's their starting point or their pain point. And then we look at, well, what they should feel like. What is the outcome at the end that they want to have? We know they have reflux always affecting them. I'm probably in that camp as well. How they should feel at the end is not having reflux. Ultimately, it shouldn't be something which is even noticeable. They shouldn't, I don't think people should even notice that they have stomachs. It's something which happens internally with us. So if you think about that, well, the input is that they know that they're uncomfortable and they want to feel comfortable about eating and the food they have and not feeling sick all the time. And then we look at this next line, which is look at the one idea that carries the whole piece. And that idea could be something like, you shouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. There are alternatives that help you to feel comfortable. The way you feel is because of the food you eat. What of those ideas could be what you carry through? So you might focus on the food, you may focus on treatment, you may focus on the feeling they're going to have afterwards, but you have an idea of how you're going to communicate that that's matched to the kind of person you're trying to reach. Phase two then is where we have to take stock of what's happening. So we run this internal auditor. So this is where if you've got someone else, it's always great to have someone else looking at this. But if you are a one-person business, well, then this is you. You are the internal editor while you're working. And what you do is you're looking at what is happening in real time as you're writing all this out. So what you want, is something that's worth you editing more at the end. So we all try to pump it out as like it's one thing, one and done. And then we go to ChatGPT and pump out this thing. We go, that will do. But we're not doing that internal editor who looks at that and goes, oh, that feels like it's so robotic. That feels like it just doesn't land. If I was that person I'm trying to reach, would I care about what I've just written there? And in most cases, if we do have a think about that, the answer is usually no. We actually internally know that nobody cares about that post we just made. Hard to write means a gap exists. So if you are having trouble writing something on your own without ChatGPT or any sort of AI tools, you've found something that you don't actually fully understand yet. It's something you're doing which you thought, wow, I thought I understood this, but perhaps I don't because I'm really struggling to explain it. So you go fill that knowledge, you go work that out. And that's where your ChatGPTs and Geminis and Claudes can come in handy because they can do all that research work. You can read and go, okay, it will give you then that idea you want to have that carries through your content. And then we stop and diagnose. If a draft is not working, if you look at it and you go, this is crap, I absolutely hate it, stop and then diagnose what it is that's wrong about it. It could be the words it's using. It could be something that feels disingenuous. It feels like it's fake. It feels like it's not you. But you've got to understand what it is about that doesn't work. We don't just look at it, read over it and go, yep, ChatGPT, yeah, that'll do. That era has come to an end very abruptly. Remember, we only got ChatGPT like 4 years ago, less than 4 years ago. So already the era of copy and paste from these tools is absolutely gone. It's not something we have the ability to do anymore because we still have to be very involved in what we're going out there. This is where the idea of cognitive bias comes in. It's an illusion of explanatory depth, which sounds very, very fancy. But we believe that we understand things far better than we do. I'll say that again. We believe we understand things way better than we actually do. And the moment that we try to explain to someone in very clear, simple terms about what it is we do, or that thing that we do, the illusion shatters. And this whole problem we get when, for instance, someone has to stand up and do public speaking and explain to someone how something works and they really fail at it, confidence absolutely is shattered along with that illusion. And this is why writing isn't just writing. Writing is actually an act of thinking. It's the act of explaining what you actually know. And this is where we get stuck, as we often get outside of our knowledge area and try to put a square peg in a round hole. We try to take this thing that we do. Let's just use the naturopath again as an example. The naturopath who says, I'm going to explain all about stomach acid and the interactions of different chemicals and things in the stomach. If they don't really know what they're talking about, then that illusion of the depth of what they know is broken and their confidence slips a little bit. And they feel bad about that. So with that cognitive bias, we have this idea in us that we think we know more about this than we actually do. We need to reach that point to understand where our weakness is so that we can work either around it or through it. If we know we don't know what it is, we go and find out what it is. The trouble is what we're doing is outsourcing all this to AI. So we're going straight to ChatGPT and saying, I don't know what this is. Explain it to me like a 5-year-old. You get it back and you then try to explain it to people like a 5-year-old out there. And it ends up not landing with them because it has no relationship to them. Because guess what? They're not 5-year-olds. They're people who have a real problem that they're looking to you as the expert. And if you don't know how to explain it or how to work with it, and ChatGPT does, it's going to show that it's not an imposter syndrome when you're actually being an imposter. But there's also a curse of knowledge. Because once you know something and you understand it, it's absolutely impossible for you to remember what it feels like not knowing that thing. And that's the big curse, is that you are trying to explain things to people who don't know this thing. What you know without you remembering what it was like before you understood it. And this is part of the struggle I have every time I do a workshop or some kind of thing like this, is I remember that there's things that I never understood until someone used a metaphor or an analogy or some kind of simile that would explain to me, not in simple terms, but they paint a picture for me. So like my pictures I'm painting today are about the naturopath, or the idea, the square peg in the round hole, of trying to link something that is well understood by everybody with a concept that has a fancy name like metacognition. So once we know that's something, we forget what it's not knowing it feels like, and we tend to skip all the steps it took for us to know about it because we're trying to fast forward people into that knowledge. And you assume then that the context that existed for us, that helped us to learn that thing, that somehow it doesn't exist for them and it doesn't need to exist. We can skip them forward somehow. But what we need to do is check on every one of those little assumptions we're making about what the audience already knows. And one of the ways you can do that is you can produce multiple kinds of content, beginner, intermediate, and advanced content for different people at different stages of their journey towards doing whatever it takes for them to be able to use your service or buy your product. Think about if you're researching to buy a washing machine, right? You're looking at a washing machine. Okay, I look at washing machines. All I'm aware of washing machines is the ones that have the door in the front or the ones that have the door on the top. Top load, front load. That's about all I know, and a few brand names, and that's about it. I don't understand any of the technology that goes on behind there because I don't think they've really changed much in about 50 years. But there is a lot about that particular kind of appliance that I could learn about. For them to adequately explain to me what I want to know about a washing machine is really if it's a top loader or a front loader and the energy usage and the water usage. That's about all I need to know. And I don't know those things about those washing machines. I don't automatically necessarily know what the difference in water usage between a top loader and a front loader is. They need to make that information available. Even if I do know some of it, I still need to know all of it before I make an informed purchase. And when we're trying to teach people something on our content in order to get them closer to actually purchasing with us or using something that they're paying for our services, then we need to make all those different levels actually approachable. If it's too simple, people at the top end of knowledge will think it's being too simplistic. If it's too complicated, people at the bottom end of the knowledge are going to think that it's too complicated and too hard for them to approach. So you kind of got to hit all those angles. So once we've done that monitoring of ourselves and the way that we're thinking about producing that content, then we move on to the evaluation of it. And this is where we have to start editing, cutting, and really being honest with ourselves. We tend to avoid this stage because it feels like we're losing something. So this is, for instance, where I just produced 4 weeks full of content and I got to this phase and I realized it's all absolute rubbish. And I feel like I've sunk all this time into it and that's all lost. So I avoid it. I don't want to go and remake it. I don't want to have lost all of that time. But the hour's gone anyway. Like whatever hours you spend on it, they're gone. So cutting it is the best thing you can do because you're not just losing the time that you've wasted, but you're also going to lose all the time you've wasted in that stuff going out. That's not the time you've wasted. You're wasting the time of people online with stuff that doesn't match them to the point where they just won't see it. So if you're not going to have anyone see your stuff anyway, you might as well spend a bit more time to get it right. And you're already over halfway there because you've done the plan, you've done the monitoring, and now you can evaluate. So you've already done half the work. So it's not that big a jump to get better content through just simply by going, this stuff's crap. Let me go back and start again. So judge yourself against the original brief you had. This is my customer. This is what I know about them, how far, what they already know. And this is how I know they want to feel. Okay. What is the theme, the idea I'm going to carry through this in order to connect what they want to feel like with where they are now? Okay. So that's the brief. They have stomach acid problems. They want to not have stomach acid problems. Does this thing I've written have any way that it helps someone out with matching what they want to be like with what they're feeling like now and getting that outcome? If it doesn't, it's actually a failed piece of content, and you need to go back to the beginning and go, this is what I need to write about. And the problem is that it sometimes sounds a little bit repetitive, right? How many times can you talk about stomach acid? Well, it turns out quite a lot of times, because a lot of people have this problem, me included. So I go, well, I'm always looking for little tricks and hacks and ways around it before I finally go, you know what? I just got to go and see someone about this. And who am I going to go and see? The naturopath that I've been watching in their content for the last 3, 6 months, a year, something like that. The last phase is the growth phase. And this is all about you going, I've published it. Now I need to assess how it's going. And this is the phase that really helps you to get that compounded growth over time. You've got to ask what worked. Okay. What about this seemed to land? And then we deliberately repeat what that was that seemed to land. In my case, there was a post I did last week that landed really well. Why did it land well? Because it sort of dug into this very strong skepticism that people have about AI right now. So yeah, it did that. But the problem was, though, that just about everybody who was commenting were not even in this country, let alone in my target audience list. So what worked is that I hit on something that was very commonly believed by a lot of people. What didn't work, and this is where did I stall, the friction point was it was the wrong people who saw it. So whilst it was maybe the right message, the wrong people saw it. So what have I got to learn from that? So for me, it was I was doing that post for the applause, not for my business outcome, which was to get more people to book my time. So what is one thing I would change in there is that I'd make it less accusatory against AI, and I'd make it something that wasn't quite so bright in its graphics to appeal to somebody who's searching for a very specific thing. Instead of saying, this is where we go wrong with making AI graphics, I could go a different direction and say, okay, what we're doing here is talking about how to make AI graphics that don't feel fake. Okay, maybe that's the post I could have done. I wouldn't have got 100,000 people viewing it, but I could have got a couple of hundred people viewing it. And out of that couple of hundred, almost all of them were in my target audience. Okay, that's the thing I could change. Rather than making it bright and cheerful and very deliberately attention grabbing, make it ask a question that's being asked by my target audience right now about how to create those in the first place. They're not looking at the ethics of this. They're just looking at, I've got little time. I want to be able to use a tool to help me make this faster. Then I answered that question, not this other thing I was talking about, which is far more academic. But metacognition in the age of AI means that we have drafts coming out in seconds. And that's the key word there, drafts, not the final thing that we copy and paste into Facebook. But it is quietly risky because when we trust ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude a little bit too blindly, our thinking goes to sleep. And the watcher, the observer, the part of us that's thinking also goes to sleep with it. But your job still stays the same. You still have to own the outcome of all this. So you have to be what they call a human in the loop of that AI. So whilst AI will do these amazing things and come up with these amazing connections and it knows a lot and it's got a lot of knowledge and information in there, you're still the one that knows that customer. You're still the one who knows who you're trying to reach. You're the one who has conversations with them all the time. So you need to bring that in. You know that the thing that ChatGPT is going to pump out is very well written and very organized and very cool, but it actually doesn't speak to that audience at all, the actual problem that audience is having. The tool is only as good as the thinking you put into it. So when I use AI to do my writing, it's something which I do in partnership with AI. It's like a sequence of questions. What's the topic you want to talk about? Who is the kind of person you're trying to talk to? What is the thing you want them to feel at the end of this? And then finally, what is the story you want to add to this? So it's getting my background experiences, stories, matching up with my particular group of people I'm trying to reach in the way that I want to reach them. And also, another question could be, what format are you using for that content? I know this feels all very academic and all very theoretical. There's going to be a lot of these other webinars coming up where I'm going to show you how to build those. There's one coming up called How to Make AI Sound More Like You. And that's essentially what I'm talking about, is how we build that sequence of questions that helps you to clarify exactly what you want your AI to be able to help you to say. So what it does, the first draft you get is so close to being right to copy and paste, but you still have to tweak this, tweak that. Okay, great. Now it can go out. It's the difference between spending 2 hours to come up with the right post and spending about 5 minutes. Because out of that 5 minutes, AI will take 1 minute to do it. The rest of it, that 4 minutes, is you just tidying it up, or maybe adding a Canva graphic that's going to work in there as well. So your operating system for being a bit more metacognitive oriented, if that's a term, is to grow. After you publish, run the postmortem, change that one thing, right? And then we evaluate. Well, we start with the plan, really. Before you make anything, write a brief about what you want to do. So think about the plan first. Then, before we go and do much more, we monitor it. If we monitor how we're writing it, how we're producing it, monitor our own thinking about how we're going into that. Then after we publish, run that post-mortem and change just one thing. 4 moments, just slow it down a little bit at each one. I know we want to just do it once in ChatGPT and let it take over everything. But the reality is that in a world of content, which is so taken over by AI at the moment, the stuff that's standing out and really landing, and all the algorithms are really picking this up well at the moment, the stuff that's really landing is the stuff that just hits someone right there, right in the chest, in their heart. And that's what AI just doesn't get quite right yet. It can say all the right words, but it doesn't have the outside, walking in the sunshine, feeling the grass beneath your feet, having a conversation with a client or a customer, feeling the empathy for them, understanding where they're coming from, getting the joy out of you connecting a solution to the problem they have. It doesn't have any of that. You need to add that in. And as you add that in, then AI becomes a really good partner to work with. You can continue learning more about this online. I've actually put together all that into a really good interactive app. So you can just look it up anytime you need to and run that test. Make sure that you are thinking as you're producing this stuff. And I know it feels like such a really mixed thing and such a weird thing, but if you can go there and find that, that will get you started on being able to do that and answer a lot of your questions as well. I know that there's a couple of questions that are coming up as well. So what I'll do, I'll just pop on out of this full screen because it's make it really hard for me to interact with Zoom. I think I saw a hand up from someone. No, it's gone down again. But yeah, basically what we're looking for is for you to find the best way forward in how to produce that by thinking at every step. And it seems like such a basic, everyday thing. You have to think before you write and have to think before you post. But so few of us actually do that. I think Flora is asking a question there. Flora, if you just want to type into the Q&A your question in there. Screen sharing is paused, I think. Let me just quickly unpause that. Hi again. I have so many problems when it comes to with screen sharing lately. There we go. That seems to be back on again now. So there you go. There's your QR code. I think that's probably what you're putting your hand up there for. So please do have a look at that, or go to learninnovation.au/2026/metacognition. It's a little guide I've put together as I was thinking through this topic as well and putting that in. And yes, using some AI to help me to make that guide as well, as long as I knew what I was doing in there as well. So hopefully that's now. I've got a Q&A in here. Thank you. Yes, a copy of the presentation, the recording, and this guide will be sent to you as well. So I'll be sending that through to you. So thank you very much for asking that question. And the replay, yes, it will be sent. So I'll be sending that through at the end of this. I'll send an email through to everybody that's got links to all of that stuff once the recording processes. I also put these recordings up on not Facebook, on YouTube as well. So if you look for my own one, Darwin Innovation Hub, or Dante St. James, you'll find a whole lot of stuff in there that I've been putting onto YouTube over the years as well to help you out.